Thank you. Mr. President, members of the court, may the peace, mercy and blessings of God be upon you. I extend to you my greetings of peace, mercy and blessing that are said, intended and hoped for by nearly 1 billion people in this world. Mr. President, members of the court, ladies and gentlemen, those who are calling for justice in every corner of the globe. It is an honor for me to represent the Republic of Iraq before the International Court of Justice today and to address your esteemed justice and humanity conscience in the tragedy of a country called Palestine and the ordeal of its people, which began in 1948 and continues to endure. As we gather in this place that captures the attention for being the fortress of international justice at an exceptional time experienced by humanity and the honorable people around the world who seek justice for the oppressed Palestinian people. Who have suffered and continue to endure ongoing injustice for 7 decades. We are confident that the decisions of your distinguished court will remain a beacon of hope and guidance for all the persecuted and oppressed worldwide. Iraq would also like to express gratitude to its friend, the State of South Africa, for presenting the case of unprecedented human rights violations committed by the occupying Israeli entity against the oppressed Palestinian people before your esteemed court. Mr. President, members of the court, we would like to bring to the attention of your distinguished court the decision of the United Nations General Assembly, Resolution 77/247, adopted during its 56th session on December 13, 2022, under Agenda Item 47, pursuant to Article 96 of the United Nations Charter and in accordance with Article 65 of the Statutes of the International Court of Justice. The General Assembly has decided to request an advisory opinion from your esteemed court on the matters referred to in paragraph 18 of the aforementioned resolution. The Republic of Iraq attach utmost importance to the supremacy of international law based on the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter and international treaties concerning human rights and relevant international instruments, and the role of the International Court of Justice as the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. And based on the aforementioned, Iraq wants to take this opportunity to present its case and express its views regarding the pending request for an advisory opinion. Iraq believes that the court's opinion will provide the necessary legal elements to enhance efforts aimed at restoring peace and stability in Palestine and the Middle East region. Particularly noteworthy is the fact that the court has on previous occasions considered cases and issued opinions related to practices and violations against the rights of the Palestinian people. And specifically, I refer to the advisory opinion regarding the legal consequences arising from the construction of the wall in the occupied Palestinian territories in 2004. Mr. President, members of the court, recalling today your distinguished court order dated 26th of January 2024 on the application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip, South Africa versus Israeli occupying entity, we are convinced that the court's orders under Article 41 of the Statute of the Court are of binding effect under Article 94 of the Charter of the United Nations. And we call for the respect of and compliance with these decisions under any circumstance or in any place in order to stop the systematic killing machine against the Palestinian people. We hope that the court's commitment to justice will lead to additional decisions, affirming its dedication to ending the campaign of mass murder and preventing acts of genocide, as well as policies of harassment, blockade, and starvation against the Palestinian people. Mr. President, members of the court, Iraq believes that the court has the jurisdiction to issue the advisory opinion, as a request for the opinion is submitted by the United Nations General Assembly, an authorized body to seek advisory opinions under paragraph 1 of Article 96 of the United Nations Charter. The subject matter of the advisory opinion falls within the competence of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Given that Article 10 of the Charter grants the General Assembly authority regarding any questions or any matters falling within the scope of the Charter. Moreover, paragraph 2 of Article 11 specifically grants the General Assembly jurisdiction concerning any matter relating to the maintenance of international peace and security. The request for the advisory opinion is related to a legal issue, as paragraph 18 of the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 77/247, which has been adopted correctly in procedure terms, signifies. We trust and hope in the justice of the court, anticipating it to not see compelling reasons for the court to use its discretion to refrain from issuing an advisory opinion. Mr. President, members of the court, international human rights law and international humanitarian law apply to the occupied Palestinian territories, and the Israeli occupying entity has the responsibility to fulfill its obligations with regard to the convention to which it has acceded, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The Israeli occupying entity is also obliged to do so on the basis of the 4 Geneva Conventions. Annual report of the Secretary General submitted to the Human Rights Council at its 34th session on February 27, 2017, pursuant to Human Rights Council Resolution 31/34 on the human rights situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, emphasizing the continuous and chronic nature of human rights violations leading to these patterns of violations. In this regard, we would like to emphasize that the Israeli occupying entity exercise regional jurisdiction over the occupied Palestinian territories as an occupying entity. Therefore, we call for and emphasize the necessity of compliance with the rules of international law and the decisions issued by your esteemed court. We specifically refer to the advisory opinion issued by your esteemed court regarding the legal consequences of the construction of the wall in the occupied Palestinian territories in the year 2004. Mr. President, members of the court, the Israeli occupying entity commit many violations and breaches of the principles of international law, and the international community has documented these violations, including those substantiated in reports by the Secretary General of the United Nations submitted to the General Assembly or the Human Rights Council. These reports focus on investigating Israeli practices that impact the human rights of the Palestinian people and other Arab inhabitants in the occupied territories, examining the human rights situation in the occupied Palestinian territories. Among these violations perpetrated by the occupying entity against humanity as a whole, and specifically against the Palestinian people, are: 1. The Israeli occupying entity adopts multiple practices that rise to the level of genocide, referring specifically to the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide of 1948. In particular, under Article 11 of the Convention, which defines acts classified as genocide, the killing practices that have targeted civilians in residential areas, hospitals, schools, and refugee shelters in Palestine in general, and in the Gaza Strip in particular, fall under the provisions of paragraph A, B, and C of that article. Additionally, the 4th Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war of 1949, under Articles 146, 147, and 148, stipulates the imposition of criminal sanctions on parties to the Convention in case of non-compliance with its provisions. Two, the oppressive practices affecting the city of Al-Quds, the capital of the Palestinian state, as well as the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque, as the occupying entity attempts to impose a demographic reality aimed at a subsequent stage which involves emptying the city of its original inhabitants and settling extremists and racists in it. This constitutes a violation of numerous resolutions, the latest being the United Nations General Assembly decision adopted on December 21st, 2017. This decision came after a series of resolutions emphasizing the necessity of not to prejudice the demographic charter of the holy city of Al-Quds. 3. Imposing a suffocating economic blockade on all industrial, agriculture, and commercial activities is evident in campaigns of land confiscation and seizure of agricultural lands from Palestinian farmers. Additionally, the destruction and sabotage of infrastructure, industrial and commercial facilities owned by the Palestinians, along with the cutting off electricity, water, and essential services, including communication and internet services, isolating the Palestinian people entirely from the world. We refer to the special report issued by the Social and Economic Commission for Western Asia, as outlined in Resolution A/77-E/2022/66, which illustrates the catastrophic economic and social repercussions resulting from the Israeli occupation and its impact on the living conditions of the Palestinian people. 4. Imposing isolating measures by constructing the apartheid separation wall, depriving Palestinians of their right to move between Palestinian cities and forcing them to wait at crossing gates for long hours, sometimes extending to days, without permission to pass. Additionally, the occupying entity enforces a permit system for movement that hinders the entry of goods and medical supplies. Your esteemed court issued its legal opinion on July 9, 2004, stating the illegitimacy of that wall based on the reasons outlined in the decision. Five, seizing Palestinian lands, establishing and expanding settlements on them, and the ongoing detention of thousands of Palestinians, including children and women, in detention centers under harsh conditions, affecting their health and jeopardizing their safety without trials according to legal principles and without providing proper care, which could lead to deadly consequences. The occupation authorities also continue to deport Bedouins from the Palestinian population from their original areas to other regions, seizing their lands. The Israeli occupying entity persists in violating the basic human rights of the Palestinian people, as well as the principle of international humanitarian law regarding the protection of the civilians during armed conflicts. Mr. President, members of the Court, based on the aforementioned, the occupying authorities are obliged to comply with the duty to respect the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. They must immediately cease the violation of their international commitments and to respect the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination by ending all actions and measures that prevent and hinder the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. This includes the immediate termination of the occupation with all its associated actions and practices aimed at prolonging the duration of the occupation and continuing to deny the inherent rights under the rules of international law to the Palestinian people. Mr. President, members of the Court, the Republic of Iraq is deeply concerned about the humanitarian suffering inflicted on the Palestinians throughout the state of Palestine, particularly in the Gaza Strip, due to the barbaric acts committed by the occupying Israeli entity by airstrikes and rocket attacks targeting civilians. These acts constitute war crimes executed with a criminal intent and serious violations of the laws of war. The Israeli occupying entity must be held accountable. The Israeli occupying entity must be held accountable for its actions, subjecting it to international criminal liability for violating the principles and charters of human rights and the Geneva Conventions related to the human rights during armed conflicts. We avail ourselves on the occasion of our presence in this great legal edifice today in order to embody the justice we see in your esteemed court in a strong and resolute stance to support the Palestinian people in reclaiming their violated rights and lifting the injustice about them. And lifting the injustice upon them. We call upon your esteemed court to take all measures and decisions that safeguard the lives of the Palestinian men, women, children, and elders, allowing them to enjoy a dignified and secure life where all human rights are achieved. Mr. President, members of the Court, please accept our sincere thanks and appreciation to you and to your esteemed Court. Thank you, Your Excellency.